we are doing what I think you teed it up nicely, a very generational, beloved movie from 1993. It's the 30th anniversary of Mrs. Doubtfire. This was released November 24th, 1993, so we're just a couple of weeks away from its actual debut anniversary. Directed by Chris Columbus. It was written by Randy Mayim Singer, Ann Fine, and Leslie Dowd, and I'll just give a shout-out to Randy Singer, who's actually an acquaintance of mine and a terrific writer. And it stars, of course, the great Robin Williams, as well as Sally Field, Pierce Brosnan. It won one Oscar for Best Makeup, and that probably comes as no surprise since there was so much time that Robin Williams spent in the makeup chair. In fact, it was almost about 4.5 hours every day that Robin Williams was in that makeup chair to become Mrs. Doubtfire. The movie was a great success. It was the second highest grossing film of 1993, just behind a little film called Jurassic Park. So very successful. It's included in the AFI's list of top 100 famous movies. The character of Mrs. Doubtfire was actually first performed by Robin Williams at a show that comedian Andy Kaufman did at Carnegie Hall. And Williams pretended to be Kaufman's grandmother. And that was sort of the genesis of that character. The movie itself was actually based on a British novel. During the mid-'70s, author Anne Fine, who I mentioned as one of the co-writers, she walked by a little shop that sold jewelry and furs and stuff, and she never actually walked in. But the owner on the door was Madame Doubtfire, and she remembered that name when she wrote her book, alias Madame Doubtfire. The original film was supposed to be much darker, showing the toll that divorce can take on children. It was ultimately decided to make the film a lot more family-friendly, and some of the more dramatic scenes were cut as a result of that change in tone. Robin Williams, of course, is very famous for his improvisational style, and Chris Columbus would use 3 cameras at a time sometimes to shoot his scenes because he was uncertain what he was going to do. And for those who don't know, that's pretty unusual to use 3 cameras unless you're doing a big stunt or something like that needs coverage. And sometimes he would shoot a scene 15 to 20 times because Williams wasn't satisfied that he had worked it all out of his system. And first he would play the scene as scripted a couple of times. Then he was allowed to improvise or playing. I'm using quotes as Williams called it. And, you can imagine just working with Robin Williams in that regard. In fact, there was so much improvisation that Robin Williams did that there could have been like 3 or 4 films of different edits of a PG, a PG-13, and even R-rated edits, though it was always intended to be released as a PG-13 film.
Joe, when you look at Mrs. Doubtfire, and I don't think any of us could put any other actor into that role as Mrs. Doubtfire than Robin Williams, but you always go down the casting road. Was there any other thought of anyone else besides Robin Williams?
Well, in fact, Tim Allen was offered the role of Mrs. Doubtfire, and Daniel Hilliard, that's the alias role when he's not as the husband. But he rejected them both. He actually went on to do the Santa Claus instead. Hugh Grant was considered for that role, Steve Guttenberg, and I like this one, Alan Rickman, who we all sort of know as a villain, was considered for the role of Daniel Hilliard and Madam. Now I'm going with the old book version. Mrs. Doubtfire. Some other roles for Stu. That's the role that Pierce Brosnan eventually got. Rupert Everett, Daniel Day-Lewis, and Liam Neeson were considered for that role. In fact, this is a role that really kind of reignited Pierce Brosnan's career because it kind of stagnated following his TV series Remington Steele that had ended a while back. And then 2 years after doing Mrs. Doubtfire and kind of getting back on the map, he would be offered the James Bond role, and he did that successfully for a number of years.
Joe,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Continue to roll. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that, kind of similar to, if anyone remembers when we discussed the movie Tootsie, Robin Williams wanted to sort of test his believability as Mrs. Doubtfire. Like, are people going to buy me in this character? So during filming, he went to an adult bookstore and tried to make a purchase in the Mrs. Doubtfire getup. He was able to do it without anybody recognizing him. So apparently the getup worked.
I love that. Joe, let me ask you this, and I don't know if Robin Williams sometimes gets his just due of an actor because we look at his silliness and the impromptu stuff in some of the movies, but I actually thought this was his best piece of work. He played a villain in a couple of things, and of course a teacher as well, and a doctor and such. I think this is his best role. Do you have any thoughts on Robin Williams, either as an actor or this role here?
Well, he certainly could do dramatic roles. I mean, you've already mentioned that, as a villain in a 1 hour photo and Good Will Hunting. He was a psychiatrist, and so he could do serious roles and did them very successfully. Certainly in terms of box office success, this is one of his most enduring roles. And of course, every actor kind of likes to play two roles, and he got to play Daniel Hilliard and Mrs. Doubtfire together here. And there was actually some talk of a sequel. Very early on, and that kind of sort of died on the vine. But then discussions started reigniting around 2014 with an announcement that Williams and Chris Columbus, the director, would be teaming up to do a sequel. Of course, Williams' sudden and tragic death just a few months later sealed that project's fates, and there's no one that's going to replace him at this point.